Hello, Soho House members. I am Dan Levy. As a member and a fan, I am very excited to be here today to talk to Kate Winslet about her film Ammonite, which is so exciting. And I'm so excited that we're doing this.
This
Um,
is I think I'm honestly more excited than you. Truly,
I'm
really,
actually like
truly.
in a ball at this point. That's how the excitement has sort of come over my body.
I haven't been able to think about very much else all day, so I really am thrilled, and I'm so delighted to meet you and see your gorgeous face. And thank you
Likewise.
very much for doing this.
Likewise. I mean, I'm trying to sort of come at this with like a casual coolness, but for
Okay, go do that. Do that version.
Fanny and desperate. Um, bef- before I sort of get into the movie, I sort of wanted to ease into it just by telling you, and I've told you this before, just not in person, just how much I have admired your career and how you've navigated this industry over the years. I think the breadth and the scope of the work that you have chosen to do is always so interesting and meaningful and um, extraordinary to watch. And you're such a chameleon. I mean, I could just go on and on and on, but it leads me to my first question, which is for someone who has done it all within this industry, how do you go about selecting the kinds of roles that you do? Because they have really spanned, genre to genre. We've gone from comedy to action to high drama and everything in between. So, what is the process like for you?
Oh God, thank you for saying all those extremely flattering things. Thank you, really. That does mean a lot. I think for me, I always want to be doing this job. I absolutely love it. I really do. I never want to dread it. And I always want to feel excited by the next thing that I know is coming. And that honestly is the thing that drives me. And I do like playing lots of different characters. I like to be able to take risks. I like to surprise. I like to sort of throw curveballs. And I want to be one of those people who is able to draw an audience in through a role and really truly surprise them. And that does, I think, get harder because I'm getting older. I've been doing this for a long time now, and also people know how I sound. They know what I look like, in this conversation that we're having now. So hiding behind all of the things that people know and trying to disappear more and more into each character is something that I luckily find increasingly challenging and thrilling and terrifying, and Ammonite was no exception to that. So that's, look, I'm so lucky to have the choice, but that is honestly what it is that drives me in making those choices, is just always wanting to stay in the game and be excited by it.
What a luxury and what a wonderful thing to have earned.
It is an amazing feeling to have that. And I really do have that in my heart.
Well, you can feel it. I mean, you can just you have such an ability to exude a kind of passion for whatever role you inhabit in a way that is really intoxicating to the viewers. And I think it's what sort of allowed you to have your pick of the litter when it comes to kind of work that's coming in. And speaking more specifically to Ammonite, how did that project come into your life? And what was that process like getting into it and getting it made?
Well, Francis came to me at the point that the film was funded. It was a very, very small budget. And I like actually, I like making low budget films. My agents will probably kill me for saying that out loud, but I do. I like the intimacy and the closeness of those experiences. And it's just a very raw, almost hand to mouth existence when you're running around in freezing cold temperatures, trying to shoot as much as you can in a day because you're going to lose the light and there isn't an extra dollar in the budget to add on to the end of the schedule. If you don't make it, you just don't get your scene. So that level of intensity and the adrenaline that comes hand in hand with that is something that I've just always absolutely loved. And it just takes me back to how I began, really. So I'd seen God's Own Country, which is Francis Lee's first movie. And I felt as though I had sort of, my insides had taken off in some way. And it's quite rare for me to watch a film. I typically feel this, funny enough, watching foreign films, particularly French films, but I'll walk away saying, oh my God, this is just my kind of film. And I really felt that watching God's Own Country. There was something about the honesty, the sometimes brutal, visceral honesty of those emotions between those two characters. And also how Francis tells a story about two people falling in love that wasn't shrouded with any elements of shame or secrecy, and that they were of the same sex. I really admired that, loved that. Mm-hmm. And I felt when I read Ammonite, that same level of gravity and importance within the story. And for me, Mary Anning immediately became a person who I wanted to discover and inhabit, and was, I was really scared, because I thought, well, honestly, actually, how am I going to play this part? How do I begin? It was a pretty nerve-wracking experience, but I knew I would have to truly hide myself completely in order to become her and immerse myself in the role and the whole experience of being her. And that was how it came about. And Saoirse, I knew that he was going to talk to Saoirse about playing Charlotte. And so immediately for me, that was just, I just sort of melted, really, because I absolutely adore her. I'd never worked with her, but we bumped into each other at things, right. And we had a few friends in common, a hair and makeup person who we both know really well. And it seemed sort of odd, actually, that we almost hadn't worked together before. And that was, so it actually came together really quite quickly. And within 4.5 months of reading it, we were shooting it. It was crazy. It was quite fast.
I think what's so unique and beautiful about his work and this film is I feel like we've become accustomed to this really heightened, highly distracted idea of like audiences can't sit and watch a movie anymore. We've become accustomed to cell phone culture, where there has to be a lot of cuts and the action has to be really fast. And to watch this movie and in God's Own Country and really see a filmmaker that was all about extracting performance from the most simplistic method of capturing sort of moments on. It's a really wonderful thing to watch, and it's so refreshing. As an actor, I can only imagine that kind of freedom to just...
It was very unusual, it really, it took some getting used to, because you're right, there's a pace to the film and a steady rhythm to it that does allow for silence and stillness. And that, I think, is exactly what you're identifying, that people, even I'm not comfortable with that, I always want to fill in all the gaps, and, my hands become my vocabulary. And, I'd be constantly, I'd say to Francis, well, can't I just do that with my head? No, just keep still, just fucking sit still, Winslet, Yeah. And there, he would just the sort of the still held, restrained nakedness of Mary's emotions, and it's true, we did choose the moments for sort of actual physical action that would convey, whether it was vulnerability or fear or longing. We would decide what those actions would be. A couple of times in the film, Mary just goes like this with the back of her head. I do it once when I'm waiting to go into Elizabeth Philpott's house to buy the salve, and then again when she's on the boat to go to London. And we sort of decided, it's just a little sort of insecurity thing that she does, just almost checking her hair, even though her hair was awful and she probably didn't really care about it, just sort of a strange little insecurity thing. And somehow using those moments in very sparse, kind of planned ways means that they say so much more. And with a film that has so little dialogue, which again took a lot of getting used to, I had to learn how to act with the back of my hands and the back of my head. I felt like, and my eyeballs, and it was alarming. I would go home and I would think, what did I actually even do today that is going to be readable? Did I, oh God, maybe this is just rubbish and not working, and what am I doing? And I would go through all of these sort of fears.
It was
Those fears don't go away.
so the opposite to watch. It was absolutely riveting to watch the two of you navigate that story because it was so candid and it was so bare and it was so reliant and dependent on the subtleties of the performance. And for your character to be so, for lack of a better word right now, almost stoic in
Yeah.
who he was, and at times very unwilling to let people in, and there was you could tell that there was such a protective barrier up around so as to self-preserve. Those moments that you're describing were just so vital to, and again, it's what you bring to these characters too that allows for the most subtle kind of whispers of vulnerability that help sort of crack things open and allow light into a character that almost feels impenetrable. So
Yeah, and it's when you talk about that cracking light, letting light into a character, I also felt that Francis and our cinematographer Stefan Fontaine, they were absolutely brilliant at letting those literally cracks of light sometimes show, whether it was, across a seascape, or whether it's on the back of Mary's hands or the side of her face, or just how Charlotte's shoulders appear with the tiny bit of light on them. It adds to the sort of translucent emotion that I know he wanted to keep sort of simmering away within the story. And I loved how romantic it was, in the sense that space for longing and desire that we so rarely are allowed to see. It's all very, hands-on, straight in there, and there's no chance to kind of just observe these people finding their way. And with someone like Mary, who there's very little written about her personal life actually historically, but so there were a lot of blanks that I filled in for myself, and there were some things that Francis invented for our story. But for me, in building who she was and kind of bolting her down inside me, I decided that she probably had quite significant abandonment issues. Her father, who she was very close to, who had taught her everything about fossil hunting, he died when she was 11 years old. And she had one brother, Joseph, who was 2 years older than her. But she had 6 siblings die after she was born, and 2 before her. So she was raised by a mother who was grieving the loss of 8 children and her husband. So a mother who probably was afraid to love Mary too much, if God forbid she be taken from her as well. And so in turn, Mary was very stoic, and she did have to learn self-reliance very early on. And I think it made her quite fearful, probably, of the world. She was also weirdly struck by lightning when she was 2. And she was actually known as Lightning Mary. People knew about this child who should not have survived. She was in the arms of a woman, a villager, who was holding her at some outside horse fair. They were both struck by lightning. The woman died, and Mary, the baby, didn't. She survived. So people talked about Mary from when she was very, very young. And so the level of sort of scrutiny that I think she felt was apparent in her from such an early age. And I think that really added to her sort of instincts to be a little bit reclusive and to shy away from public view, and also to just actually be socially incredibly incapable of coping, and not knowing how to be loved properly, not knowing how to love herself. And so just sometimes those kind of strange, awkward emotions that you see also play out within Charlotte and Mary as they're falling in love with each other, they came from somewhere really quite specific in Mary's past. And it was really interesting trying to layer all of that in and not have it feel too much or too little. It was fascinating.
I can only imagine the journey of
Yeah.
navigating it. And for people who were not aware that this is a real life story of these two women actually existed, these were
Yep.
real people. And I guess my next question to that point is, having played real people in the past, I thought what you did with Joanna Hoffman and Jobs was absolutely extraordinary.
Thank you.
Absolutely
Thank you.
extraordinary. And
Thank you.
I guess, as an actor, what are the tips or tricks that you have when occupying a space that has or is continuing to be occupied by an actual person? How do you go about interpreting someone who is alive or was alive into your own sort of personification, because it has to be something that feels comfortable in your bones too. There has to be that marriage of who the person is and who you want to make the person, appear to be.
Yeah.
Is that process for you, and how do you even begin to start? Is it research? Is it watching
Well,
them?
it is research and prep. And for me, I think when I have played real characters who've really existed, I've always had to do a dialect other than my own, and that becomes such an important part of creating the character and me being able to hide me behind the character. But then, of course, the trick is to develop these dialects and not be able to hear them, for them to just disappear and exist. And that's really hard to do. And actually the accent in Steve Jobs that's one of my top 3 that actually made me crazy and throw things. It drove me nuts. It was so absurdly hard to do. But I did have to change a little bit of Joanna Hoffman in terms of how she spoke, because actually her when she spoke, her register was actually quite high. Like, she kind of talks like that a lot, right? It's right up here in her face, right? Like this. So if I had done a whole movie with a register like that, it would not, I think, have been very comfortable for people to hear. So I had to find a place that felt a little bit more, I don't know, integrated or something. But I did spend a lot of time with the real Joanna, and that helped me as well, just hearing her stories and wanting to sort of honor her through the stories that she shared. With Mary, of course, I didn't have that. And there are no images of her. There are a couple of paintings of her that probably aren't really accurate, in fact. And we did sort of a little nod to some of the paintings of her by adding certain fabrics into our costumes that are visible in the paintings. But there's so little written about her life. There's almost nothing written about her personal and private life at all, other than we know that she never married. She remained single until she died, actually, of breast cancer at the age of 47. And lived with her mother. She did live with her mother. So that part is also very true. But I was able to add quite a lot of my own interpretation into her. But there was a sense of responsibility I felt too in playing her, because people of Lyme Regis, people who know exactly who Mary Anning was and the significance of her scientific work, they also have their own version of who Mary was to them in their minds and in their hearts. And so it's a really, really fine line, like trying to take ownership, but not doing something that is, offensive in any way or too heavy-handed. So yeah, it was just a difficult balance to strike.
Well, not to mention just the actual needing to convey a realistic depiction of someone who is, preserving or excavating fossil work. I don't even say it properly, but the process itself, I could only imagine, was something that had to be properly sort of worked on in terms of probably going up, knowing that there is a community of people who will be watching this.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was that was what I'd say all the time. So my teacher was this lovely guy called Paddy Howe, who's a paleontologist who is from Lyme Regis and very well-known local figure. And he would just literally, he'd say to me the whole time, he said, look, don't fuck it up, because they're gonna, they'll be on me. God, Paddy. So, but I did spend a lot of time with him, and he really did teach me. So not only teaching me how to find fossils and identify what they were, but also just certain techniques for how you actually find ammonites. Ammonites, they aren't always just lying around on the ground. They'll be wedged in rocks, and you can identify if a rock, they're actually called nodules, could be full of ammonites by the shape of the outside of this rather smooth thing that looks like a rock or a stone, but is not. It's actually, it's made of a different sort of composition entirely. But learning how to smash those things open and not shatter the ammonites inside, that was a whole that was a nightmare. So my arm, I mean, I really, like, I tore muscles in my arm from endlessly hammering on the, they'd be like, Kate, it's getting dark and it's raining. Can we go in now? I'm like, no, just another one. Whacking these things on the beach. But it was amazing. And actually having the experience of learning in the way that I did on the beaches where Mary would have worked truly made a difference to how I physically was able to understand Mary too, because she holds herself so differently to the way that I carry my own, crazy all over the place self. And a lot of that came from that work that I did, just understanding how much my body would really hurt every day a lot. And just my feet, wearing the footwear that she had to wear, all of that stuff. My hands burnt, every day. They would just sting and hurt the whole time. So, yeah. And I remember getting to the end of the shoot and my own hands I didn't recognize them at all. They had become something else. It was really quite, darling, I know.
It was quite remarkable though, and I think from a just an entire crew perspective too, looking at that movie and just how seamless the props department and the production design and the cinematography. I mean, it exists in such an, it appears, obviously because of the subject matter as at times a very strenuous exercise, and yet when you're watching it, the reality of the world that they created was so effortless and felt so real and lived in. I'm always really so fascinated by what props, people can do to sort of recreate that kind of, was it a recreation or were you actually breaking real?
No, we had a couple of recreations. There is a moment on the screen where I whack a rock and it falls open like that, and there's an ammonite right inside. That is actually the first time I ever mastered cracking a rock. It split open right on camera, and the expert Paddy is off camera. He's yelling, "Don't gasp!" And of course I go, because I'd done it. And they somehow managed to edit it out. But what was amazing was that within the ammonite, there was all this water came pouring out. So can you imagine? I licked it, I drank it. I was like, right away. I know, it was quite extraordinary. And that's one of the things I love about my job, is that I get to experience these things and learning something new. And yeah, the entire production team were wonderful. And actually the luxury we had was that it was low budget, and therefore and it's set in a town which is predominantly working class. Mary was a working class woman, lived a life that was full of struggle and extremely harsh. And so actually nothing had to be polished or finished or glossy or any of that. So we were constantly, just getting everything dirty and making everything look and feel real. And it's quite difficult with period costumes to make them feel like clothes. And I made a decision with Michael O'Connor, our costume designer, very early on, that Mary, there's no way she would have worn a corset. Typically women then did, but we would find early photographs, which photographs came in later, actually around 1860. And our film is set sort of 1840, but we found some photographs of female fisherwomen who would sit mending the nets and hauling them in, and every single one of them was clearly uncorseted, wearing jerseys, like chunky big sweaters, and men's pants. And of course it made complete sense that they would, not for any desire to appear masculine, but because they had to protect their bodies from the cold and from the labor and the manual physical work that they were doing. And that was the reason why we put Mary in trousers on the beach, was not because we wanted to make her seem in any way manly, but because it was practical. And that made sense to me as a character choice as well.
It's so fascinating in being an actor and getting to be exposed to history and getting to be exposed to various sort of other jobs, that you have almost a firsthand look at an experience that some people will never get to even come close to experiencing. Is there any other research or skill or experience that you can recall that was really kind of extraordinary, or
Yeah.
feeling really kind of excited by the experience.
Yeah, so I did Avatar with James Cameron. I'm in Avatar 2 and 3, and I play a reef creature, a reef goddess.
Okay.
And so she can't you tell? Thanks. And I just look really reefy. Um, and so all of my work was under the water. These people, these tribes lived under the water, and so I had to learn how to breath hold, how to free dive, and that was unbelievable. And Jim Cameron said to me, he was like, look, you really don't have to do all of the water work, truly. You know, we do have doubles, and there's some people. I'm like, why would I not? How amazing. Why would I not? I could not wait. My God, I was so excited. And so I had about 5 weeks of training, but my longest breath hold was 7 minutes and 14 seconds.
Come on.
It was unbelievable. I mean, it's great. And you actually think that you've died. Like, as I'm doing it, because when you do these sort of breath holds for practice, you sort of just hang in the water like a manatee, with the instructor right by your side and a stopwatch, and he's talking you through the breathing and how to keep your mind relaxed. And you really have to relax your entire body, and it is a serious act of will. And as I was doing this particular breath hold, I remember lying there thinking, I think I've died. I think I'm dead. I mean, I think, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is what death is, where you just like float. I mean, it was it's completely crazy. 7 minutes, 14 seconds. So
7 minutes.
I know. Properly trained for 5 weeks. I couldn't just like do it right now. But it was absolutely brilliant. And Sigourney Weaver did the same thing. She was doing all the breath holding as well. And so to be under the water, 25 feet down in a tank, weighted to the bottom with Sigourney Weaver, we could just do a 3-minute scene right there, underwater, no problem, holding our breath, no bubbles, no goggles, no clip, nothing. Amazing. And to see Sigourney do that, who's in her 70s, I mean, it's incredible.
This is news. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
there you go.
that is
yeah.
something.
I get to do a lot of cool things for my job.
Well, I have 2 more questions and then I'll let you go.
Okay, honey.
Knowing how intense this process was, and I don't know what your process is in terms of being able to sort of shake the character either at the end of the day or at the end of the project, to have experienced Ammonite and Mary, and then in terms of, because then you have Mare of Easttown, which is coming
Yes.
out, which doesn't look light.
No.
It looks very, I mean,
Yeah.
I can't wait, but it looks very heavy.
Yeah.
Was that within a close proximity to each other? I guess what I'm looking at is like, how do you balance wellness psychologically with the weight of inhabiting these characters?
Well, it's really interesting that you ask me that question at this particular moment in time, because I have to be honest, I actually feel in the last year and a half I have lost the balance. I truly do. And normally I'm a Libran, and that apparently we need to be balanced. And I'm not overly into astrology, but the more I get to know myself, I do know that to be absolutely true. And I've lost the balance because I went from Ammonite, which we wrapped in April of 2019. And then I was almost immediately in preparation for Mare of Easttown, which I knew that I was doing even before I'd started Ammonite, actually. So I was already thinking about Mare slightly in the back of my mind. And then letting go of Mary was quite difficult, but slightly helped by the fact that I did have to just start concentrating on Mare right away, because I play a detective who is in personal crisis and is in charge of solving a murder that happens in episode 1 of a young local girl who everyone knows within this community. And I had to, my God, I mean, I spent time driving around opioid districts in Philadelphia. I had to learn how to use a gun. I'd never even held a gun before,
Mhm.
a lot of things that were very, very, very difficult for me to do. And working with police departments in the real Easttown and Delaware County in general, and they were amazing people. And the dialect, I have to do a Philly accent, or it's a Delco accent actually. All of that, again, that was another one that made me throw things, a lot of things, and smash some things too. Also, I remember. But Mare, so Mare started shooting October 2019, and then we stopped in March because of COVID. And so then I had to hang on to this character who I was 5 weeks away from finishing, and then went back at the end of the year, September to December, and finished up. So actually, I only slightly feel like I have just finished playing Mare, which truly left quite a lot of trauma. Which, if you watch the show, you'll see why it is pretty heavy. So,
And I can see why.
yeah, so I definitely, so it is honestly interesting that you asked me that question now, because I'm truly trying to, I'm quite strong, and I have such a lovely family, such an amazing, supportive, incredible husband. And so normally I can just roll with it, get over it, it's all okay. But actually I feel like I've stockpiled quite a lot of things by doing all this work. And I definitely, I slightly need to learn the kind of wellness, take care of yourself emotionally part of it, so that you don't just fall apart crying when you do an interview about Mare of Easttown, which happened to me the other day. And I was like, wow, okay, maybe we should stop. Crazy.
It's
Yeah.
remarkable though how much the work can move you. And I think
Yeah.
actually kind of a wonderful thing. It really is, it's such an unexpected part of the job that really kind
Yeah.
of
It is
triggers.
yeah, it is unexpected. And I think, and to be honest, I always feel, awkward almost talking about it, because it's so easy for actors to sound so self-indulgent. Yeah, I find it, and even there are times when I will listen to an actor talking and think, oh God, stop now. I'm even guilty of that level of judgment, which is dreadful, because I know what it's like, and I know what it costs, and that's why I can't do it all the time, because I always feel I need to sort of recover a bit and then recharge, and then the whole preparation of becoming somebody else again, whilst remembering how to cook and care for my family and things like that too.
Too.
That too.
I have one last question.
Okay.
It's been such a thrill for me to get to talk to you. As someone who I certainly look to as a human who has navigated this oftentimes very precarious industry with a tremendous amount of chutzpah and grace and humility, what do you think, in terms of lessons you've learned or information that you've gained, has allowed you to do this in a way that, at least perceivably to me, has you decades into an industry still very much a human being and not a shell, if that makes any sense?
I have to say, standing in my own truth,
Mm.
and that's not always easy. I do a few tactical things. So I don't read reviews ever of anything I've done. Never. I haven't done, I think I read some reviews of the first film I ever did, Heavenly Creatures, when I was 17 years old. And then I read something not very nice in one of those reviews, and I thought, oh my God, I'm not okay. I have to not do that then, if I'm going to do this job. And even the good reviews, sometimes, my dad will phone and say, oh darling, please just read this, it's fantastic, they only say nice things. I'm like, no Dad, no, I can't, I mustn't. So I try and stay away from that. I also don't have social media, which I'm often a little bit torn about, because sometimes I do feel I have some things I'd like to share or say, or, I mean, particularly now, I think this is such a seismic time for everybody. I think that women's voices are being used and heard in a completely different way for the first time ever. And I'm really enjoying doing press and trying to sort of use my words in a renewed, mindful way, so that a younger generation of women will know that they too can actually take those words and stand up and speak for themselves. And it doesn't mean you're going, we're going to win. We're not fighting a battle. We're all standing together in a really sensitive, I think, powerful way, and trying to, I think, say things that are clear and kind and compassionate, and hope that a younger generation will take that, because they're the ones that are going to change the world. They really, really are. And I just think, you know, sometimes I do think, well, maybe if I did have Instagram, you know, maybe I could say a few things. But, you know, at the end of the day, I can hang on to my mystery, whatever I have left of it. And, you know, and also, you know, and my family comes first, you know, and I'm lucky that I absolutely know that in my bones. And so that's always been my anchor point. And like I said at the beginning of our conversation, I absolutely just love the job. So as long as I love it, and as long as I believe in it, and as long as I put in the work, then that's how I think that's how I stay sane. And sometimes people don't like what you do, and sometimes they love it, and that's just the way it goes. But that's okay. You just got to keep going.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's to your point. It is the industry has this perpetuates this idea that everyone constantly always has to be. I mean, even just in terms of questions I get asked after my show, it's like, well, what's coming next? And do you feel nerves about what you're doing? And I'm like, why does the industry constantly have to hold us to what we've done? Why
Yeah.
can't it be celebratory of what we're about to do in a way that is not necessarily constantly comparing? Because
Well, exactly. And you know, but to your point as well, you know, like in your show, you have that wonderful gay relationship that just is
mm,
part of your show. But people notice that and talk about that. And I feel with Ammonite, because it is, again, it's an LGBTQ story, the same sex connection between two women, that just is. It's two people falling in love. The fact that they're women is never explained or justified or sort of used as a part of the narrative in a sort of fearful, shameful way, with hesitation and secrecy around it. And the thing is that I just feel that if we are, which I hope we are, if we're to move towards more LGBTQ stories just entering our mainstream, you know, that's our world we live in. Why isn't that in our movie theaters and on our TV screens? You know, why are we constantly comparing those few storylines that exist?
mhm,
And it's because there are so few,
yeah,
you know. And so I feel like with your show and with Ammonite, I hope that we're both contributing, you know, to that evolving, important conversation in a way that, you know, is sincere and positive, you know, and normalizes same-sex connection. You know, I think
and
you know,
gives people something to see themselves in ultimately.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Shared experiences, I think, are what's going to build us into a kinder future, hopefully.
Yeah,
Um,
you are right. I agree.
well, I mean, I could talk to you for the rest of the day, but there's only so much bandwidth, I think, on the internet. So until I talk to you again, this was such a thrill.
Thank
Congratulations
you.
on another extraordinary performance. And thank you for talking with me today.
Oh, thank you for talking with me, Dan. Means a lot to see your
Like
lovely face. Thank you so much. Thank you.